Protest Songwriting 101 from Rising Clyde. Okay, so we're now going to choose our instruments when we're writing our protest song. And the best one to start with is usually a guitar. Here's mine. It's an electroacoustic from Epiphone and has a built-in tuner. So you can tune up on the go without having to faff around at all. It's quite good. And it holds its own as an acoustic as well as when it's plugged in as an electroacoustic. The good news is if you've got more than one musician in your group, you can diversify your sound with the addition of some folk instruments. For example, this banjo here is a really nice cheap one. Again, it's from Epiphone, and it just gives you a nice folky sound to add to the guitar that you come up with. So again, you can also get a similar folky sound out of this instrument. It's called the bouzouki. This is an Irish bouzouki, it's known as, because with the Greek bouzoukis that you might have seen before, they have a big bowl that comes out to about here and for the back end of the instrument, whereas this is much flatter and a nicer sound. But it does still have the traditional kind of bouzouki where it has 8 strings. We need to come up with a chord progression that's going to really hook our listeners into the track that we're writing. Best way to do it is really to start off with the basics and work your way up from there. So a simple kind of G, C, D chord progression is a great place to get started. Something like this. You don't have to stick to the standard G, C and D. You can use the shapes, but using this little device called a capo, if you clamp this onto your guitar up and down the fretboard, you can use the same shapes, but it will change the key of what you're playing. So something like this. And what it is because I've got the capo on capo 5 here, and because I've tuned my guitar down a whole step from standard tuning. So when I play a G shape, for example, on an open string here, that's actually an F chord because I've tuned the guitar down a step. Gives you a deeper option when it comes to... Okay, now it's time to move on to a little bit more nuanced finger picking work, and I'm going to show you in the banjo, because the banjo, the open G chord, so with no involvement with the left hand whatsoever, you can pick a G chord using your right hand. And like I showed you earlier, I mean, I use the 3 fingers here with the plectrum. It's called a hybrid picking style, and it's just really for me because I prefer using the plectrum and can get involved with the other fingers as well. So something like this. And once you get used to it, once you get practicing, you know, this speed will come, and what will happen is you just practice on this with a G chord. And what I do is I also throw in a wee strum every now and again with the back of my fingernail. It's kind of like the claw hammer style, where you'd sort of do a lot of this. So I'm not using traditional banjo picks which clip onto each finger and have like one thumbnail clip, because that's more of a kind of scrug style. I tend to play more kind of claw hammerish, but it's all kind of relative. You can pick and choose your own style, literally. So what's involved there is a bit of hammering on as well. So because with the G chord being open on the banjo, you can hammer on an entire C chord or an entire D7 chord when you're doing the G, C, D chord progressions, which is really helpful when it comes to sort of laying down a melody or a beat or a track on the banjo. So it's really fun because with the hammer on, it's just literally, as it sounds, you hammer on to the frets that you're going to be playing. So you can do that with, just the one sort of fret that you're using. So or you can do so with the whole chord like I was just showing you there. And so when it comes to changing from G to C on the banjo, it's just as simple as that. In terms of what I've called more kind of link melodies, in terms of the guitar, what that's really involved is the kind of transition. It's again a part of the transition between chords, and it's just really kind of basic to help out with getting from chord to chord and making it sound a bit more fancy than it actually is. So for example, with things like going from a G to a C on the guitar, it's really quite straightforward. We go. So it's those little linking bits between the chords that I'm talking about. So when it comes to going from a G to a C, you have this kind of melody. So and that takes you into the root note, which is the C of the next chord you're going to be playing. So your C chord comes here. And when the D comes in, sometimes you go to a D7, and then you have the open on the bottom string. So that's all I mean by the linking melodies. It's just a really kind of straightforward way of making your track sound a little bit more fancy than it is. If you want to take inspiration from some of the greats, don't really feel comfortable coming up with it directly from scratch, things like Masters of War by Bob Dylan, which is a real fantastic one and involves very little movement around the fretboard. So if you are a kind of novice at the guitar, a kind of more beginner intermediate level, then this one is a really good one to get started with. It comes with a D minor shape, so it comes with like your first finger goes on the first fret of the bottom string. I put my pinky finger on the third fret of the second string, and then my middle finger goes onto the second fret of the third string. What that allows me to do is it allows me to do the hammer-ons and the different movements that Bob Dylan does during this, because it's not just a simple D minor, because it's a bit more complicated than that. But what this general shape to start off with allows you to do is to use your ring finger in order to do little hammer-ons and pull-offs in order to make the other chords that come into the song, but from the same shape. So you can keep it in the same shape. So, and then what you do there is we hammer on with the ring finger on the third fret on the fourth string. So it goes. Is he also does a hammer on the third fret on the fifth string, which is your C element. So it's the sort of chord change. And so he comes off with these two fingers and goes on with this to the C. So come you masters of war, you that build the big guns, you that build the big planes, you that hide behind walls, you that hide behind desks. I just want So that chord progression goes through the entire song, and what Bob Dylan is great at is writing really, really amazing lyrics that really punctuate the song. So this is almost like the music is almost really background to the lyrics, because the lyrics are what you really hear on a Bob Dylan track. You know, the melody is kind of secondary to this. So that's another way of doing it. A great way to bring together some of the techniques that you've learned, just in terms of the hammer-ons, the linking melodies, and the finger picking. Great one for that is We Shall Not Be Moved, which of course football fans know up and down the country, but this is an old African-American slave spiritual, which has been recorded by just about every good artist under the sun has recorded this one. It's a really great track, and again it involves a really simple G-C-D chord progression. So your G shape, your C shape, and your D shape. And that's all you're going to need, and it's a really straightforward one to learn. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the waters. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the waters. We shall not be moved. Right, so we're going to try and bring together some of the techniques that we've learned over the course of this video. Going to be using some of the hammer-on techniques, the pull-offs, the linking melodies, and some of the finger picking as well. And to do that, I've got a song by Billy Bragg called The Price of Oil, which was written around about the time of the Iraq War in 2003, the Second Gulf War. And in Billy Bragg's view, that was an American action to simply gain control of oil fields rather than to topple Saddam Hussein. You can have your own opinions on that, obviously, but it's a really good protest song, and that it is really simple in its construction, and it's got the three chords, mostly used throughout, the G, C, and D shapes, and utilizes a lot of these finger picking techniques to give it a lot more oomph. And it's a really great tune, really brings together some of the lyrics, but here's a wee version of it. As you can see, there's a lot of the little hammer-ons, so now I ain't no fan of Saddam Hussein, oh please don't get me wrong, but if it's freeing the Iraqi people you're after, then why have we waited so long? Why did Thanks for watching. Hopefully you picked up a few tips on how to write the next great protest anthem that we'll all be singing along to soon. And as Neil Young said it, keep on rocking in the free world.